this principle of do fewer things isn't necessarily do less work. It's work really hard on fewer things over a longer period of time.
Yeah. So do fewer things. There's another bit of a logic to it as well, which I think is clear when I add two words to it and say, do fewer things at once.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Fewer things at once actually means that your rate of completing things is probably going to go up.
Yeah.
Right. So like this one gives palpitations to people with bosses because they interpret it as like, I'm going to do less stuff. They see it typically through a standard sort of zero sum employer manager relation, like you would have in the labor politics of the industrial sector.
Yes.
That, I as the employee in the factory, what makes my life better is going to make your life as the factory owner worse. And what makes the factory owner's life better is going to make my life as the employee worse. So we're in a fight, right? And we're going to have to just go back and forth. It's not that situation, actually, in this case. Doing fewer things at once is actually going to produce more things. And the reason for that, actually, it's like really insidious and subtle. It is the administrative overhead that comes along with saying yes to something.
Yes.
Right. So once you say yes to something, there's an administrative overhead in an office. That's going to be emails. That's going to be I get shudders thinking about it, but standing meetings, like, I don't know. I'm also an academic, so you don't have to deal with this as much, but they're like, great, we'll meet every Wednesday to talk about this. Everything generates that, right? Which is fine. Like there's overhead with commitments. You got to talk to people about it. The issue is that's generated whether you're working on that at the moment or not. So if you say yes to too many things, they're each generating this overhead tax. That begins to pile up. Right. And then once that begins piling up, the time left in your day to actually execute the work gets smaller and smaller and more fragmented because these meetings aren't going to all fall one after another. They're going to fall sprinkled throughout your day. So now the pace at which you're actually completing things goes down. So how long does it take in between things you finish? That actually begins to get longer. So if you keep fewer things on your plate at once, it's not that fewer things get done. Actually, it goes faster. So I always tell people, if you start there, it's okay. Because once you bootstrap doing fewer things, your boss is going to say, why are you so productive?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's actually going to be the opposite thing. Like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like you're shipping at a pretty fast rate.
I believe it. I found that with my own team. I actually had to sit down with one of my employees maybe 6 months ago. Yeah. And I told her, I'm like, you're doing too much. Like you're good at 5 things. I need you to be excellent at 1.
Interesting.
And it was really effective. It's been really helpful. I think I've definitely seen, as my team has grown, I have seen the importance of specialization. Because when you're small and it's just 2 or 3 people, everybody wears a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And the stakes are a little bit lower. But now that we're growing quite a bit, I'm finding that I'm having to have these conversations of like, you are going to be the team expert at this one thing.
Yeah.
And you are in charge of this domain. And it's been great.
Yeah.
It's been really effective.
Do that well. I mean, this is like software developers figured this out a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like we want you to write this type of code that you write really well, right? That's why software developers figured out a while ago. We're not just going to push tasks on people. We're not just going to say, here's like 20 features we need.
Yeah.
Hey, take care of these. No, we're going to use some sort of agile system where if there's a feature that needs to be done, we'll write it down on a board. And it's not on your plate and it's not on my plate. It's on the team's plate.
Yeah.
It's generating no overhead tax.
Yeah.
Because no one is assigned to this yet. And then we're going to give you one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And just like sprint, do that thing, all the 10x code this. And when you're done, we're going to give you another thing, right? They discovered programs get built faster and better that way than just dropping everything on everyone at once and like, just, hey, figure this all out and, add all these features and keep up with them.
So one of the recurring subjects that happens throughout the book is remote work. I don't think you ever completely address it directly, but it continually shows up as examples, particularly over the last few years since the pandemic. And I was thinking that this concept of the overhead tax, which I love, and it's a completely accurate way of thinking about it. I think there's something about digital work that deludes us. It makes the overhead tax less apparent.
Yeah.
Like if you come to me in person and you're like, hey, Mark, I'm doing this event. It'd be really cool if you showed up. If for some reason, we can talk about it. I can ask like, okay, what are your expectations? How many days is it? How long is the talk? All these things. And I can get a really good sense of like, okay, how much time in my schedule is that going to take up? Whereas if I get an email from a random company or organization saying, hey, come out to Indiana and come speak to 1,000 people and we're going to pay you a shitload of money. For some reason, that email just looks like easy money. And I'm like, just on paper, I'm like, oh man, this is the best deal ever. And what, for some reason, my brain is not processing that we're going to have multiple Zoom meetings. I'm going to have to fly out like 2 days early.
Yeah.
There's going to be a meeting with the organizers. There's going to be a meeting with the VIPs. There's going to be a sound check.
There's going to be a lunch.
There's going to be
with
a lunch.
the VIP lunch. There's going to be a reception.
There's going to be a book signing.
Yeah.
My flight's going to get delayed coming back. It's like a 4-day commitment.
Yes.
And it's actually not worth it. And it took me a long time to start saying no to those things. Part of me wonders, like, what is it about digital work in particular that obfuscates the overhead tax?
I mean, I think it matters you're not seeing someone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the friction, little reductions in friction can make a big difference. Right. I mean, there's a study that Gloria Mark did where they went to a company and they took 12 people and they turned off their email. It's like one of these cool Gloria Mark studies of like, let's unplug this wire and see what breaks, right? Yeah. But then she told me a backstory about the study, which I think gets to this, is that one of the subjects in the study told her, like it's not in the paper, but told her that he was really annoyed at his boss in general because he had this job where he had to set up a laboratory for experiments every day. It was an R&D lab. And the boss would just keep emailing him with like, hey, do this. Can you just do this? Like, get me this. No, just get me. Why? Did you get the email? Did you get the email? And he was really annoyed because it would keep distracting him from what he was doing. And it was kind of intricate what he was doing. Then they selected that guy to be one of the no email people in the subject. In the study, the boss essentially stopped bothering him. And then what Gloria would say, the reason why this is interesting is the boss's office was like 3 doors down from the laboratory that this guy was setting up. So like the boss could just walk down the hallway and ask this guy, hey, could you do this? What about this? That extra little friction, that was the difference.
Yeah.
Right. It like substantially cut down. So there's something about, like if I pitched you right now, come to Indiana. Yeah. It's just like you're saying, I want you to come give a talk. And I've done exactly this in Indiana. So I know we've probably done it for the same company.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, we've probably done it for the same company. You're right. In person, I'd be much more reluctant to ask you because I can watch. I mean, I know it sounds small, but like asking someone to do something, you have to watch their face and the consternation, and there's like a social capital.
There's a risk of feeling the rejection. It's easy. Like if you don't get an email back, it doesn't really bother you. But when you stand face to face with somebody and ask them something and they're like, no, like it sucks.
It does suck. And and I think that is true, right?
Yeah.
So you get that with the digital.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, I don't care if I send this out, because what happens, they're going to say no. You also have to see the context, right? So, when I see you in your office, I see you're doing things. So I'm thinking like, Mark's kind of busy. Like, okay, maybe I'm not going to bother him about this. On email, for whatever reason, or Slack, the way we imagine other people is basically like empty vessels to do our work. It's like we imagine like you're just sitting there.
Oh, my entire team is nodding along right now.
Exactly. And especially like the killer is not necessarily the trip to Indiana is going to take 4 days. It's the thing that's going to take like 45 minutes of your time because they imagine like, come on, why not? What are you doing right now?
Yes.
Like I do things that take 45 minutes all the time and they don't understand you're busy or the scale of how many people are asking.
Or even 5 minutes. Like it's dozens of 5-minute things.
Yes.
And there's something to, there's a cognitive load that comes with task switching.
Yep.
And so when you are always available and when everything seems minor and easy and you just get inundated constantly with a 5-minute thing here and a 5-minute thing there, it wears you out in a way that, I mean, this is a lot of what deep work is about. It wears you out in a way that, working 4 hours on one thing does not.
And this is, I think, is like the productivity poison.
Yeah.
Is like the fact that the human brain is not a microprocessor, right? Like a microprocessor, every op that it executes, every op code is the same as far as it's concerned. It just, here it goes to the circuits. It takes exactly one cycle. Give me the next thing. So all that matters for a processor is you want to make sure that it's never idle. So if you design a processor, like all of us computer scientists had to do in school, you want to keep a pipeline as full as possible of instructions so that like it's never idle. Human brain can't do that. Like if I want to switch from what we're doing now to talk about or think about something unrelated, I have to do a lot of cognitive work. I mean, and it goes down to the neuronal level. I have to inhibit certain networks that are relevant to this conversation. I have to excite different neuronal networks that are relevant to the new conversation. This can take 10 to 20 minutes. It's why when you sit down to do something hard, it's this sucks. Ooh, I'm in flow now, right? Like 15 minutes in.
Yeah.
Like why is that? Because it takes about 15 minutes for your brain to reconfigure to what you're doing. and then it goes easy. So yeah, so what happens when you have to switch every 5 minutes? You always feel like in the first 10 minutes of trying to write, like everything is just frustrating. Your cognitive capacity is reduced. It's deranging. Like it completely exhausts people. It's like working in an environment with weird flashing lights and it's like too cold. Like it's not conducive to how humans actually function. Like I really do think constant context switching is like the number one mental health affliction of knowledge work, right? Like it's a massive issue.
And it's something that technology, to the point of digital minimalism, it's something that technology enables further. There are a couple themes here that keep coming up on the pod with multiple people. Yeah. So like when Oliver Berkman was on, we spent a lot of time talking about how removing friction actually can in some cases make things worse. And with him, it was more in kind of like a philosophical, existential sense. Like it's without friction, things don't feel as meaningful. They don't feel as important. When David Brooks was on, we talked about how the loss of social friction actually makes relationships more superficial and more tenuous. Yeah. And here we're seeing it with productivity. Like that lack of friction is actually in some ways kind of overloading our brains. Hey everybody, thank you for watching. This was part of the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. That's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Stitcher, whatever you use. So check it out. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.